Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artists Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the In Focus podcast, brought to you by the South Coast Artists Index. And we have another guest. And as I do with most of the podcasts, I will let our guest introduce themselves and spell their name, because as you know, sometimes somebody's traveling in the car and they heard a name and they thought they heard it correctly, and they definitely didn't. I had a situation where actually wasn't even traveling in a car. A young man came into the bookstore, and he's teaching at UMass and CVPA, College of Visual and Performing Arts, and I could have swore he said his name was David Bird. His name is David Burr. So it's very important so we know how to spell the name so we can Google somebody. So with that in mind, guests, go right ahead.
Hi, my name's Nancy Hayes, and it's NancyHayes.
Okay. And as you know, you've heard these podcasts before, Nancy. Any weird quirks with your name? Because sometimes, you know, you would think the simplest name would never have an issue. And I've heard some pretty good ones.
No, I find my name to be extraordinarily ordinary.
Ordinary. Nobody tries to spell Hayes with an H-E-Y.
Not that I know of. I'm from outside Philadelphia, and there are a million Hayeses. And when I moved here, I was kind of surprised. There's only a few Hayeses in the phone book.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, we had a city councilman when I lived in the south end of the city. His name was Danny Hayes. He went by Danny Hayes, and that's one of the few that I've heard. Let's go in the Wayback Machine. It's funny how at some point in time somebody's going to transcribe all of these shows, all of these podcasts, and they're going to try to figure out some sort of a pattern that we all have followed. Can you remember the moment? Can you remember, lucidly enough? Maybe lucid isn't a good name, isn't clearly enough into your past as to when you knew, yeah, this is what I'm going to do.
I probably have a bit of an unusual background compared to some of the other people that I've heard you interview, in that my family is made up almost entirely of artists. So there was no point of departure. It was more of an entry, and I never left. In that my grandmother was an artist, my father's an architect, should have been illustrator, my mother was an artist. My aunt is an artist. It's just in both sides of my family, that's just what you are.
So I guess there was an assumption.
A huge assumption.
Well, how many of you are there? How many siblings do you have?
I have two siblings. One is an architect, as was my father. My other brother, my middle brother, it's kind of funny because my older brother and I, the oldest one, both dark hair, kind of that dark English. While my middle brother's blonde hair, blue eyes, doesn't look anything like us. And when he was a little kid, he had a nameplate put on his desk. He was going to be a businessman. And he was very clear about it. He knew what he was going to be. So in my family, it's a bit of the reverse, where I'm not going to call him the black sheep, but he is the one who diverged from the path.
And that's what I was looking for.
Yeah, and he's done very well for himself. So I have cousins who have done other things, but in my immediate family, it's just the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. The same thing as in families with lawyers and doctors. That's interesting. So, your younger years, your memories or recollections of crayons and paper and such. Can you recall any of those for us?
Well, I do have something that haunts me a little bit, and it's kind of interesting in that I remember being in kindergarten and I remember doing this drawing, and it was, I guess we would call it abstract. But in my mind, it was roads, and I was very clear. I was like drawing these roads, which would have just come out as lines on paper. Um, but there was like this emotional connection to doing this drawing, and it was in kindergarten. And I think I have spent my entire life trying to get back to that drawing, connecting with that drawing. I know that sounds a little odd, but there was something that I felt in that drawing that was beyond just the physical mark of drawing. And so that I guess in a weird way, that's a launching pad. That but I always, as I've heard the other interviewees say, I always I drew on the desk, I drew on my books. My mother actually was one of those women who just dabbled in everything. Her strongest suit was as a flower arranger, and she was an amazing flower arranger. She entered the Philadelphia Flower Show my entire life. And if you know anything about flower shows, the Philadelphia Flower Show is a bit prestigious. And she was in a garden club, but she also would enter doing these individual niches, these little competitions, and she'd always win. And but she also worked in clay, and she started working in clay when I was maybe third grade. And we had a wheel in our basement. But she didn't like me working down there because I made a mess, and she didn't really want me. And that was her space. Now as an adult, I kind of get it more. But when I got to high school, I remember there were kids, girls who befriended me so that they could come to my house and play in clay. And I didn't really like that, Yeah, I felt a little used, because I was that household you could go to and do things like that.
The fun place.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to to that drawing of the roads, because that's, and it's probably something I should start, as one of my typical questions to the visual artists. I used to have this dream of having this huge pencil. I'm talking about something that was at least 10 inches in diameter with a sharpened point, something like a golf pencil on my shoulder. And it would be on the ground or some sort of substrate. And there would be this mucky, yucky stuff in it. And I would be pushing this pencil around throughout the dream. It was just kind of bizarre. Every so often I get a flashback to that, and I still to this day have no idea what the heck that is all about. But I've heard other people say that they've had spiritual encounters doing their work, that sometimes they are in control of what they're doing, that I hate to use the word possessed, but they've been possessed or taken over by something else. Have you had those kinds of moments?
So interesting that we're going in this direction. I'm like, you lead the conversation. So I had no idea this is where it would lead.
I have no idea you were going to say any of that either. So this is organic, by the way.
Yes, it is. It's very organic. A word that is typically used about my work, by the way, organic. The spiritual and art. That's a subject I'm timid about talking about, because I don't. I guess I never want to be categorized as anything, really. But I will say that for me, my artistic experience is about, it's about many things melded together. So I start with the fundamental foundation of art making. I went to art school, I went to grad school. I had 8 years of post high school education. So there's a lot of foundational elements to making art. You know, we talk about composition and line and form and color and all these things that come together to make an image. So for me, that is foremost the foundation. So that's coming from my intellect, so to speak, right? It's coming from years of experience, many failures, and whatever. And then once that foundation is that ground is laid, then the conversation starts, and there's a conversation between, for me, and probably many artists, if not all, that conversation between the artist and the piece, and it's a back and forth conversation. And that is where, if we want to bring in the element of spirit, we want to bring in something that's larger than ourselves. That's the entry point right there, is within that conversation, being open to what is the piece trying to tell you? What does it want to be? That's something that I ask of my work all the time. You know, I say, what do you want to be? Like, tell me what you want to be. And my job is to listen and try to accomplish that task. And I guess one could view that as a spiritual experience, in that I am not strictly guiding the process, that it is entering a realm that's bigger than myself. But I also don't want to fall into any kind of mystical categories about art making. And at this point, I bring something else up because this is something I struggle with, actually. I'm a very, call it straight person. I don't partake in any substances that alter my mind. I'm very comfortable with going there, maybe on a cup of coffee, or I don't need anything to get there. I'm completely don't need any outside influences. But I will say, a lot of people look at my work, and it's one of the first questions that I'm asked, because they think it's like it has this psychedelic quality to it. And there's a bit of me that, often it's kids, right? Especially if they're under 30, that's the go-to question. But I get a lot of adults asking me these things too. And one of my responses is, I could never do my work if my head were not clear. It's way too complicated. It's way too involved. But, and nor would I have the hand-eye coordination to do it, because it takes a tremendous amount of hand-eye coordination, just holding the brush and doing very small things. Mm-hmm. I'm going to let you step in right here.
All right. I mean, I'm looking at the work, behind you. And when you're speaking about your mom and flower arranging, there was that connection right away. It's like, ding, that's her mom's flower arrangements, and in the most abstract kind of form, because a lot of people don't realize how flower arranging is kind of a really interesting craft, if we can. Well, some people have elevated it to an art, but it's both two-dimensional and three-dimensional. And most people only look at flower arrangements as two-dimensional, I think. They don't see the three-dimensionality of it. They don't see the relationships. There's an enormous amount of composition that goes on with it. And then, yes, your other work, the mandala things, there are several artists. And as I do these podcasts, I keep making these notes. I'd love to be able to get this artist, and this artist together, because there is a similarity in their work, and that might tick them off, because so that's very delicate because since I heard the name Cy Twombly, which is like from the old Three Stooges routine, Niagara Falls, slowly I turn step by step. I would hear Cy Twombly and my brain would just shut off, and I never wanted to experience him. I had no idea who he was to begin with. And then somebody told me he was a very famous artist, and I couldn't understand why people wouldn't just say it looks like his work, but it is his work. And then David Richardson sort of like pushed my nose in it, and I started looking and I started reading about him, and it's like, oh my God. So there's another aspect of this, So for example, David Bagley, there's a friend of mine, Hernando, Lorenzo Andrade. Oh my God, I'm blanking on his name. Furman Coronado. He was a graduate student at the University of Miami, another Cuban refugee, a year before me. And I sent some of the images that I had of his work to David Baggerly and said, this is like kind of bizarre, you know? So this cosmic consciousness or whatever. So those things, you know, intrigue me. And so as far as the psychedelic aspect of it and you know, the stimulants, you know, other than caffeine, yeah, I can understand that. And I don't need that. And I've been reading The Artist's Way, and she keeps going on and on about artists having blocks. And I feel like such a charlatan, or like maybe there's something wrong with me, but I've never ever had a block.
Neither have I.
I was just going to ask you that. Okay.
No.
Why haven't you ever had a block?
That's a fun question. I think it's because I just work every day.
Okay.
I'm very disciplined. In many ways, I run, I go to the studio. I'm blessed to be able to do both. And I just, there's no, you know, and okay, so what is a block? I mean, nothing keeps me from going to the studio. At times it's not as easy. At times I don't know what I'm doing. But if I really don't know what I'm doing, which does happen, I just get a piece of paper and just go, okay, whatever happens, happens. You know, I just try to take the judge and kick him out of the room. And, you know, maybe today's not going to be a great day. Maybe today's just not going to get me anywhere. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. So I think it's just in that you just keep moving forward.
Would you say that most of the times that you haven't been able to, you know, crawl to the easel has been because you were just physically exhausted? I mean, you just didn't have anything left.
Not so much. It might be because I need to go rake the leaves, which I'm avoiding, or, you know, I have other things to do.
Yeah.
And those are actually good breaks. Those are, you know, it's healthy to have other things to do, right?
Yeah,
I think I have enough other things to do that sets a rhythm, so that I mean, I don't think I've ever had a day where I didn't go down to the studio because I had a block. I don't go to the studio for other reasons, but not because I have a block.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I know when I was in advertising, which is a very cerebral occupation, and, you know, I was trying to get on faculty, and it was the same thing. What's your exhibition record? You know, where else have you taught? And it's like, what part don't you people understand? Okay. I work like 70 hours a week in a very mental occupation. And I mean mental on a couple of levels. And I get home and I am just drained. I mean, if I could, I have difficulty just lifting my finger to scratch my nose, kind of thing. So that's difficult. But I remember when I was cooking and feeling really, really depressed, like, oh my God, and I would be doing, you know, spinach salad. And I would be looking at spinach leaves and going, oh my God, they look like birds. And so, you know, it never shut off. And then our graduating class from SMU, Southeastern Massachusetts University, the precursor to the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, for people from out of the area. Our BFA class of 75, we started getting together. You know, we're of that age, and we're clinging to our memories and each other and so on and so forth. And a couple of my classmates did not have the opportunity or could not paint. And I thought I was a weirdo enough by saying, I've never stopped painting. I've always painted in my head. And I heard several of them say that. And I thought I was just going to fall down flat like a baby does on my butt and on the ground, and just like totally stunned by that kind of idea. Do you go through those periods where you are painting in your head?
Well, okay, back to the rhythm and that I work during the day. I have something that I do in the evening that is completely not related to making art at all. And then I lie on the couch and watch a little TV and then I go to bed, you know? So
Yeah.
I have this rhythm. Like I don't ask of myself to, I don't, I keep like a schedule
Hmm.
and I work on a schedule. And I want to bring something up
Sure.
because listening to your interviews, and I've heard you many times speak about your fondness and your memories for your school and everything. I almost feel like I owe you an apology,
Why
not
is
just
that?
you. I moved here in 1987 to go to graduate school in the ceramics department at Swain. I was here for the first year of Swain, and then it turned into SMU, and I ultimately got my degree from UMass Dartmouth because it took me 7 years to turn in my thesis. But when I came here, I had no idea what Swain meant to people, to you, to my friends that I have now that are from this area. I just had no idea. I mean, I was completely clueless. And not only was I clueless, I don't think anybody in my department understood the significance of this school. We came here because of the artisanry program, and that's all I knew. And
Hmm.
as a ceramic major, well, I was a sculptor. I do like to make that distinction because I'm not a pot maker. I was a sculptor, but our studio was up on Elm Street. Other than the art history classes that I took and graduate seminar, I was completely cut off from the rest of the school. So I went through that program for 3 years, really not having any understanding of what Swain was, how important it was to people, and the significance of it. And unlike you, where you created such strong bonds, I have not kept in touch with anybody from graduate school,
Wow.
sadly. I mean, people in came here, we kind of did our time and people left.
Wow. You know, as you're saying that, you actually reminded me of something that I would like to investigate. Is when we were in school, BFA class of '75, there was no CVPA, there was no College of Visual and Performing Arts. It was the art department. And there is a legacy that goes beyond the merging of the schools, with one of my favorite teachers, Ed Tonieri. I believe he was either an instructor or an instructor and also an interim president. I guess they had scads of him at Swain. But he founded the department. But when they decided that they were going to take over the old New Bedford Textile building on Purchase Street, it was quite isolating. It was and I'm wondering about the students that went to school there or studied there or trained there, whatever the proper term is. How different are they from the other classes, the classes that were on campus when it was a department, or the classes that were when we graduated, CVPA was a hole in the ground. They just started construction on CVPA. I think it all makes a huge difference. There is a connectivity between Swain and SMU. Before the merger, Swain had this thing where there are adult people who get emotional and some of them get angry still discussing the situation. And we could only say that that's a testament to the instruction that we received. And that's all I can say.
Oh, I think it's beautiful when I listen to you and I hear how those connections meant so much. I didn't get that, not even in undergraduate school.
Wow.
So that's a real gift that you get. That's great.
On the other side of it, the University of Miami was kind of like, this is it. It's like they just chuck you in there. Here's your studio. Here's the key. You got to teach these classes, and your thesis advisor is this person, and that was it, cut and dry. So I remember sitting there in my studio, and I had a studio mate because first year students don't have their own studios, and there was this one guy who was interesting. Let's put it that way. Very interesting. So everybody's like, oh, you got Mark? You know, but I also made friends and was taken under the wing of these older guys who were former advertising executives or you know, like they made lives and names for themselves. Steve Fuller, who I'm still in contact with, him and his wife, he's designed the Channel 5 logo. That thing's been up there for nearly 50 years. And there was other people. And, you know, we did have a chance about in 2016, Steve and his wife finagled me to do a workshop. And I thought I was just going to do the workshop. And lo and behold, Peter Zorn, and a couple of other people all came out of the woodwork. And it was like a mini reunion. It was a good thing because Peter dropped dead 6 months later. Oh. But that was the bond. It was like being in episodes of MASH. The only way to describe it. But the emotions there were with the people, whereas with SMU, it was the instructors and the curricula. And I don't know if there is that kind of opportunity anymore. Have you done any teaching or?
I have never wanted to teach. I've been very clear about that. When I went to graduate school, I hadn't been working in clay that long. I did not work in clay in my undergraduate years. I graduated interdepartmental, and I did a lot of printmaking and sculpture. So I had done a year at the Philadelphia College of Art to prepare myself for graduate school. They had a special student program. And so when I came to graduate school, I still felt like I had a lot to learn about the medium that I was working in. And it was also a very odd, difficult time for me in my life. And I probably used the studio a little bit too much as therapy, but it was just a crazy time. Now I'm like losing the question. I'm forgetting what you asked me. I'm like going off on this memory.
It was, I mean, I asked you if you had ever taught, because I wanted to see, if that thing existed.
Actually, so I never went to school to get my MFA to be a teacher, which most people, that's why they were there. So you get your MFA and you could go work in a university. So I never pursued teaching. I pursued table waiting, a romantic notion that I came to when I was in undergraduate school. I said, well, I'll be an artist and I'll wait tables. And I did it for 20 years. And but I always made art. So it worked for me. And the little bit of teaching that I've done, which has not been a lot, I've done grant-based teaching and another situation. I found it was exhausting because you're not only teaching, you're kind of taking in all this emotional stuff from the kids. And if they've got emotional things that they're working out, it's just, I felt like teachers should be social workers, at times. And I've never had the opportunity to teach on a university level. So I've never had that opportunity to kind of get into that level of talking about art with kids who are a little older, for which you can kind of get a little deeper. Mm-hmm. So the only opportunities I've had have been with high school kids.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting.
It is.
And I also feel like I am still learning so much. And my friends who are teachers, I'm always so impressed because they're capable of articulating the art making process on a level that I don't feel capable of articulating. And I also think to be a teacher, you have to love teaching. And the teachers who have meant the most to me really loved what they did. And that's why they were good teachers.
Yeah, exactly. Before I forget, in the teaching that I've done, the passion I brought to it, because that's all I wanted to do. And I didn't know I wanted to do it. It was Herb Cummings, Alma's dad, who said, "So what are you going to do when you get out of here?" Oh, well, paint and still painting. And he's like, uh-huh. He says, "Have you ever considered graduate school?" I was like, "No." "What for?" He says, "Well, you need that to teach." "Well, why do I want to teach?" "Because it's going to make you some money so you can paint." And, it was like Forrest Gump, "Yes, sir, drill sergeant," and then I had a situation where I was supposed to be an assistant, and the instructor that I was assisting came down with cancer, and they threw his classes at me. And it was like, oh my God. Well, I went in there, and the very first class, it was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, because for me, it's always been a matter of bad timing with the economy. A lot of friends were getting jobs, and they're getting rotated right out, and it was like a revolving door in art departments, or they were just hiring freezes. So, and teaching is, to me, more of a shot at immortality than painting is. And we all want to be immortal. I mean, it's just in our genes, My next question is, did you have George Miller? Was he still on faculty?
No, I don't know who that is.
George Miller was both a sculpture instructor and a ceramicist. In fact, at UMass, where is now the Career Opportunity Center, or no, it's a College Bound, and what us old timers call Group 1, they call LARTs, down on the ground. He built a raku kiln.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he was a very intellectual man. He was so intelligent that he overwhelmed me. I didn't know quite how to handle him.
Yeah.
And I wish to heck I had had the opportunity to go back and apologize, because the light didn't go on for years.
I think if we had to go back and apologize to all those people who started a little fire that we didn't even recognize was there, we'd spend a lot of time apologizing.
Yeah.
Because isn't that the way of life? It's we see it with our kids, like, they get to high school and you want to shake them because you're going like, oh my God, don't you understand? This is such an amazing opportunity and you're never going to get it. It's like we waste education on the young.
Yeah, we do. And I always tell, young people, if you think high school rocks, wait till you get into undergraduate school. And then you're going to think that's the peak of the mountain, but it's going to be blown away by your graduate years.
Right.
Then it's all downhill from there.
Well, it's when you're really invested,
Yeah.
and for me, a little bit, it was finances too. I paid for graduate school, right?
Yeah.
So like, oh, I'm paying for this. I better be invested.
Yeah. And then there's this, well, let's look at this phenomena. Before we started recording the show, we were talking about other things. And I was telling you that I had about 60 podcasts in a can. We've released 55. Actually, we have more. They haven't been processed yet. But still, I haven't, if I add them all together, even if I came out to 65, that's only the amount of artists that are in the Hatch Street studios. There are artists everywhere.
Yeah.
And, one of our goals is to speak with every single one of them for posterity. But why? Where did they come from? Why are they here?
I think Swain, and I think UMass Dartmouth and its art department. When I came here, I came from Philadelphia. One of the ceramics teachers that was teaching at Philadelphia College of the Arts said, "Oh, New Bedford, there's all these mills there." And he started going on about the mills, and I didn't know what he was talking about.
His euphemism for studio space.
Right, well, that's what he was implying, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't anything I'd encountered as of yet. This was still, oh my gosh, this is 1986. So it was pre, all the artists moving into mills. So when I came up here, it was just so beautiful. it's just such a beautiful place to be. And there were these mills, and I did end up having a studio in one of the mills way after graduate school. But so I think that's an incentive for the artists to be here, is that we do have affordable studio space. So, and it's an incredibly beautiful place to be. I find the people to be, for the most part, very warm. And when I did wait tables for those 20 years, many of which were in the area, people were always very kind and supportive.
What places did you work at?
No, I worked at what was Margaret's in Fairhaven for years, for
Okay.
maybe 8 years, because I came here first. I started at Candleworks.
Yeah, it's still Margaret's.
Yeah, then I went to Margaret's, and then I moved away after graduate school for almost 4 years. And then I moved back, and I continued at Margaret's. Then I went to the Back Eddy for a year, and then that was the end of my career.
Okay.
Waiting tables.
Yeah, yeah. Were you there when Aaron DeRigo was there? Or Chris?
It was Chris. Yeah,
Chris.
Schlesinger, yeah.
Yeah. Schlesinger, just right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in food service as well, but that's what happens when you have 2 art degrees and you hit these periods of recession. It can get to be pretty brutal.
Yeah.
The Philly connection, that's another thing too that I'm noticing. And once we get the database, that's going to be a huge component, more the egghead academic component to the artist index, and that's actually the index itself. There is a pretty large Philly component in this area, which is kind of interesting.
I have several neighbors who are from the same area as myself. It's not unusual for me to get in a conversation with somebody, and either they're from where I'm from, or their grandparent, or somebody. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah. That would be something to look at. Now, we've talked about, how you came up, so to speak. Where are you now?
Well, I guess I would like to reference to the fact that I was a ceramic sculptor for years. And it wasn't until I turned 50 that I started to paint. And I'd always wanted to paint. And, I'd hit, I'm not gonna say the pinnacle, but I hit a spot in my, quote unquote career, if you want to call it that, in clay, where I didn't know if I was going to get back there. It was like, okay, I managed to get certain wards and whatever. And I was like, I think I missed the boat a little bit. Like, you get to a certain point and you either take the ball from there and keep pushing it forward, or you kind of start rolling down the hill. And I realized the clay wasn't, it just wasn't giving me what I needed anymore. And I started doing these little paintings in really the evening, because I'm very disciplined. The daytime was creating these sculptures, and I was moving, I was evolving as a clay artist. I wasn't stagnant, but as I started doing these little paintings in the evening, I just fell so in love with putting colors together. And the imagery was really not that different than the imagery I was making 3-dimensionally. It was just kind of being manifested in color and form and line on a 2-dimensional surface. So at one point it was like I just woke up and said, that's it, I'm done. And I put an ad on Craigslist for all of my equipment, of which I had a lot of equipment because my mother had been a ceramic artist. So I had inherited stuff of hers. Plus, I'd just been doing it for so long that I had acquired quite a bit. And I just put an ad up, and this young girl came, and she was just starting out, just finishing college. And I said, for X amount of dollars, it's all yours. She came back with the truck. We filled it up, and that was it. And I had no idea who I was going to be as a painter. I had no idea what was going to happen. I was completely in the dark. And I said, the only way I'm going to know is to start. And so where am I now is, so all of this is build up to answering your question,
Yeah.
is that I'm still on that road. I'm on this road of where the process takes me.
Yeah.
And COVID was really interesting. COVID feels like a turning point. And it's also kind of marked my 10 years in clay and work painting. And so during COVID, I started really playing with watercolor and changing. The imagery wasn't changing, but how I approached the process changed, in that how I use now paper instead of board, and what can I do on paper in contrast to what I can do with paint on board. And so now I've actually, in just the last month, I've started cutting shapes out of, okay, well, I don't really need to work in a rectangle or a square. Why don't, my work is so shape oriented. Why don't I just cut out the shapes? So I'm in the process of discovering where that's going to take me. So, and also I think when we're young, we're going to sell art, and we're going to make it, and we're going to do all these things. And then as we get older, the reality sets in, and you go, who am I making this for? What am I doing? I've got a tremendous amount of work just piling up that my children will have to deal with when I pass. And I guess you just have to keep following that road that life takes you down, and just see where you end up.
Yeah, that's true. The good news is you can introduce your children to Richard, Dr. Richard Connor, because he handles the states.
Oh, believe me, I think I've said something to Richard before, or I said, you're going to have to get in touch with my husband so he doesn't throw out all my work.
Yeah, if Richard could, he'd probably clone himself, because right there, I mean, it's both a business, a passion, and an emergency of sorts. I mean, he's just focusing on mid-century art, and every day that another painter dies is another increase in inventory somewhere, or storage facility. It's funny, my wife is much more pragmatic than I am. She's a graphic designer, and she, I would get frustrated like a lot of artists do. Yes, I want to sell. Did I ever imagine myself selling and making a living as a selling artist? Yes and no. Yes, but I'm too much of a realist to believe it. And so you get frustrated, and you wonder, okay, why am I doing this for? Who am I doing this for? So on and so forth. And and she always puts me in that corner by asking me the simplest question: do you want to be supported by your art, or do you want to be sustained by it? What's more important? And I said, can I have a little of both? No, one or the other. And I think there's much more to that. It's more mystical, more Eastern philosophy in that question of hers. Because if you choose one, you want to be supported by it, then I think your art dies a little bit, because you're working the market. And I guess that's okay. I mean, there are artists who have been able to work for the market and maintain this little niche of sanity for themselves, work that nobody ever sees, but that's what they're happy about. The other way is to be sustained by it, and to put your soul into it, and regardless of what happens, whether it sells or not. I think at some point in time, when it's time, it starts to happen. And because I think we do really get in front of ourselves, and we stop ourselves from doing quite a bit. The COVID thing is quite interesting. And not to put you on the spot, but this is to have a intellectual conversation between two artists, two painters. In a nutshell, What if you had to explain it to a child? What was
Mhm.
what was pre-COVID as an artist
Pre-COVID,
to you? Yeah,
as
to you.
compared to COVID.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I don't know if there is much difference. I'm the kind of person who eats the same thing every day. Like seriously, I mean, people know I will go like years and have the exact same breakfast,
Oh
and
my
then
God! So you're like those people we encountered working in food service that we already knew.
oh gotcha. Oh, I knew their order before they
You put
sat
the
down.
you put the
Totally.
slip up. Yeah,
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 yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh,
yeah,
totally.
yeah.
And and so, um, so I can't. I think. Oh gosh. Maybe expectations were a little different pre-COVID. I think maybe I was a little bit more hopeful, or I was still thinking about the value of my paintings. Um, if they were to sell, this would be the value, and this would be the value because, like, one of my bigger triptychs, which 246, it ultimately is 6 feet by 4 feet,
Yeah.
um, would take me a month and a half to do.
Right.
So it's like, okay, I'm not, so when we start pricing our work, there's a lot to be taken into consideration, and time is one of them, not to
Yeah.
mention experience and education and everything
Mhm.
else that goes into it. So I think that my mind was a little bit more conscious of these things. And then when we got into COVID, it was as if, um, like all that just went out the window. Like I don't care anymore. It was like something shifted and then our relationships, I practically lived in my basement, which is where my studio is during COVID. And I do anyway. I mean, I do on a regular day,
Mhm.
but there was something in the fact that the only way I'm going to see people is that one scary trip I took to the supermarket per week, right? It was like this, all of a sudden, everything just shut down. And it was, okay, so how do I stay sane in this world that's just completely shut down? And I think the relationship to making art shifted in during that time. And I feel like now I'm still a little bit in that, or that maybe it just opened up a new door, and I'm still, I'm walking down that new road.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think it was a bad thing. I think it was an interesting.
All right. So we're still processing what's going on in COVID proper.
Yep,
In the
yep,
middle of all this stuff.
yeah.
If you had to make a wild guess as to post-COVID, how do you think we're going to be? How different will we be?
Hmm. Well, we certainly are learning how to use technology in a whole new way,
Yeah.
right? Um, so the other thing that I really don't have any speculation about is showing work. And I'm going to use this as a moment to plug the next show.
Sure, go right ahead.
Because I told the curator.
This may not show up until post-show, but anyway, it's
That's
because
okay.
because these aren't timely. Yeah.
I emailed the curator yesterday, like, oh, I'm going to do this podcast. I need I better use the opportunity.
Yeah.
But it's going to be at the Danforth Art Museum. And I don't know if you know anything about the Danforth, but it was its own separate enterprise, so to speak. I don't know what you want to say. And then they have since merged with Fitchburg University, I guess, because of funding and whatnot. But anyway, the show is curated by Jessica Roscoe, and it's called Wandering. And it's in March, I believe.
Oh, there you go. This will be in time.
March, April, May, June. It might go through August. It's a long run.
Yeah.
And it's with 4 other artists. So that'll be interesting. And that'll be the first time I've shown my work since COVID. And that was, especially so working with Jessica, she came to my studio a few years ago, and we were going to do the show, and it was going to be at the Danforth, and they coincidentally lost their space right before the show was supposed to happen. And then a couple of years went by before they kind of reestablished themselves and got a new space and up and running again. And then she contacted me about doing the show again, and it was supposed to be in the fall, and then we had COVID.
Yeah.
So now it's like I say this, okay, well, we hope it's going to be in March. I hope it's going to happen. But I used to put a lot more effort into actively showing my work. And that's something that happened as a consequence of COVID. I kind of just retreated into my hole.
Yeah.
And I hope that maybe as we come out of this, I hopefully starting to, maybe we'll get more in sync with showing my work again, because
Yeah.
I do like to show my work. It's I'm not making it to sit in my basement. I do like it to get out in the world.
Yeah, exactly. I know exactly what you mean. The other thing is that the openings, the exhibition openings will
Right.
definitely not be anything like they were, and it's going to be for another year. That's what the projection is. And
Well, maybe people will go to galleries and see art for the right reason, which is to see the work, not just just the who's who of.
The other thing is the experience of viewing work virtually versus the experience of it viewing it physically is quite an interesting thing.
Well, that actually concerns me. In the old days, when we had slides, you knew what somebody was going to see. It was a slide, it was tangible, it was physical. You sent it to somebody, they put it up on the screen and knew exactly what they were going to see.
Right.
Now, if I send you my work, I don't know what you're going to see.
Right.
I don't know if your monitor's calibrated. I don't know what device you're looking at the work on. I mean, oh my God, we were looking at work on our phones, and what can we really see? So
Exactly.
that concerns me a little bit. It's all too easy to look at things on the screen, but what are we really seeing? It might devalue the work a little bit. I'm not sure. On the other hand, I have been introduced to so many incredible artists on Instagram. So it's that give and take.
Yeah. And there's a couple phenomena going on. One is that are artists who have never associated with a gallery for whatever reason, either through their inability or no luck at all knocking on a door. It seems that they have been doing quite well. People unsolicited offers saying, hey, I went on your website, I went on your Facebook page, really love that piece, how much you want for it, boom, boom. And they're like, oh my God, anything, and might as well go for it, check them out, make sure this is legitimate, and figuring, well, that's it, I'm pretty good. And then another one and another one. And at the same time, the gallerists are having, I just had a show in October, that finished in October at the gallery at 4. And Chas Hickey is quite an astute gallerist and business person. And I was very excited to get in there. And I'll be quite honest with you, because I went in there to do an interview last year. And I was waiting for him to finish up some business. And I looked and I saw, the dots. I was like, wow, there's a dot. There's a dot. Like, this show's only been open 3 days. So I counted 8 dots in 3 days. I said, wow, if I'm going to get into a local gallery, this is going to be the place. Well, unfortunately, it's no great secret. Those days are gone right now for the Gallery of 4 and other galleries. And he has, advertised on on Rhode Island Public Radio. I mean, he's done everything he is supposed to have done. The weird thing is careful as he was to work within COVID regulations, there are people out there who have no concept of the dangers of COVID. So if you had an unscrupulous gallery owner who figured, screw them, let them come in, I'll just hide in my office with a mask on, he could probably sell more work. I'm being very crass, I'm being very crass. At the end of this, it's either going to strengthen galleries because they've learned a lot they survive, number one, and number two, they've learned how to survive, and that, so on and so forth. Or it's going to be the total end of galleries. Don't forget Saatchi and their contemporaries. I'm blanking out on a couple of their names. They're all Italian last names, in fact. They all started off in their living rooms, having salons. Salons.
Yeah.
Okay. But they all had, the salons in there, and it was basically kind of like a wealthy person Tupperware party, but with art.
Mm-hmm.
And then it evolved to the galleries, and the galleries became these shrines of modern religion, and when I mean religion is like quote unquote, there was no God. The art was the God.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the artist was too, but so we have all this total evolution, and I'm just sort of curious as to what happens when we get out at the end of this tube, this pipe of COVID.
Well, I think look at all the online sites that have popped up. I mean, I'm on Singular Art, I'm Artful Home,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just what you have to do now. And
Yeah.
it works for some. It's Artful Home. I've basically just sold prints. I've sold a few small paintings, single art. I'm not the best at participating in these things. I could put more effort into it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I'm worse. I mean, having been a marketer and advertiser, it's like the plumber with the leaky pipes in his own house. But you brought up an interesting point. Prints. Do you think this has done something for the print market? Because you have that group of people, the Generation YZs, whatever letter of the alphabet we're up to now, who are a little bit more intellectually acute than the previous generation. They enjoy art, the art scene, the cosmopolitan. They enjoy espresso versus, a cup of joe, that kind of thing. They prefer to live in urban areas versus in the suburbs because they don't think their fathers were well disposed to think that 2.5 acres of grass to mow was not the mark of a man, successful man. So again, they're more cosmopolitan. They want theater and so on and so forth. But they also have limited budgets. They can't afford a new car. They can't afford anything more than a pretty good apartment. They can't afford a home, so on and so forth. They're still paying off student debt. Long story short, enter the prints. And at one point in time, giclée, which is nudge, nudge, French for inkjet, now have become acceptable. In fact, a piece of artwork reproduced on canvas has now become acceptable.
I am not anti-prints. I don't think I would do it on canvas. I don't even paint on canvas, so that wouldn't make sense. But no, I'm totally into affordable art. I actually I lived in Italy for a while, and when you would go to the standa, which is like their Woolworths, everything was nice looking. Everything is the aesthetic design is part of the culture. And I think we're missing that. And I think if we can give that to people at an affordable price, hallelujah, right? We have to raise the aesthetic. I was brought up on very strict aesthetics. My father being an architect, we had, all our furniture was Ames chairs or Scandinavian. None of it was comfortable. Yeah. But that didn't matter. And so I think if prints offer an opportunity for people to enjoy art in their home at an affordable price, I think the cliche term is quite funny. And in Artful Home, you have to have so how many you have to have a limited amount of prints. So 1 out of 200 or whatever. You have to give them a definite max. I'm like, you can make 5 million. I mean, the whole idea of like numbered prints is kind of a joke. Yeah.
Oh, edition 1. Yeah. One of.
Right. It's like we're hand printing these.
Exactly.
It's not like
exactly.
We're going to the press.
Yeah.
So let's just be honest about it. It's about the quality of ink and the quality of the paper.
Yeah.
And
that's increased quite a bit.
Yeah, and prices have come down, and I in terms of the whole commercial thing too, one thing we haven't spoken about is I am, I would, this is my dream. I have a dream. I have a dream that somebody who, with money, your kind of experience, somebody who knows marketing, knows business, knows fabrication, knows how to do everything I don't know how to do,
Mhm.
comes into my studio and sees things and goes, that spot right there, that could be a pillowcase. That right there, that, who could identify,
Yeah.
who could take from the vocabulary, like just say the studio is like this large thing of images and vocabulary, and they could come in and they could just pick little pieces, and they knew how to commercialize might not be the right word, but know how to
Yeah,
utilize
yeah, yeah,
those
yeah.
images in a way that was more commercial. I have nothing against that, because again, to me, if we can elevate people's aesthetics and make them aware of what an aesthetic is. I mean, so
Mhm.
many people aren't even aware. And if a print offers that, all the better.
Yeah, I mean, the mass production, the obsolescence, all that stuff is being swept away, I believe. And the other thing too that's cool about the prints is, not going through an organization, online organization, and they just keep popping up one after another. And they expect you to do your own marketing. A lot of them don't. It's a game of numbers. Eventually they'll have of a clientele of 1,000 artists, they'll probably have, I don't know, 75 or 80 that really, really selling, and the rest of them are just, you go through categories until the ones who just drop off.
Mhm.
But the really cool thing about it is you can, a hand signed print, but you can also inscribe it to the person who bought it. Now, they have a little bit of you, because they also have your handwriting, and also their name is on your art piece, which it wouldn't be on the painting. And no, it's not the original painting, but their apartment can't deal with the size, their budget can't deal with the price. There was a sculptor, I was speaking about this the other night. There was a sculptor in England who her work went for around $10,000 a piece. I mean, they were almost like life-size sculptures. And it's when 3D printers first came out, and she thought to herself, So she went out and bought one, and she made, I don't even know if you can call it a maquette. Is before the sculpture,
right?
But I don't know what you call a post-sculpture maquette, maybe. I don't know. So she made these little tabletop size ones, and she sold them for $1,000 a piece. She priced them at $1,000 a piece. She made more money selling those reproductions than she did the original, but at the same time, the original's price went up in value.
Yeah.
Because she was,
Right. Yep. Yep. And she gave the opportunity to people to have something
Exactly.
that they would not normally been able to have. And
Exactly.
I mean, there's two sides to the story. There's people who don't want to see their work in prints because maybe they feel like it cheapens their work. I respect people who feel that way.
Yeah.
Each to his own.
Well, there's also an investment too, Nancy, because
Yeah.
you got to schlep it to, and I'll give a plug to Bob Bergeron at Tricolor in New Bedford.
I love them.
Okay, you got to schlep it down there.
Yeah.
Okay, he's going to give you a price for the scanning, and it's going to be way better than anything you could do with your iPhone or even your SLR. Okay.
Yeah.
And so there's an investment you've already made. So you've made an investment. You got to pay Bob, and now the hold your breath part is, how many prints can you sell to pay off that debt? Okay.
Right.
And then anything after that is going to be profit.
Right.
And a lot of artists, I think that's the stumbling block. The stumbling block.
So I actually work with them, and I made a series that's for print only. The paintings are not available. It's a for print only situation, and I don't sell that much. But when I do, it's not always about making money. It's about, getting yourself out there. That's one more person that's going to be living with your work. And, it's a love series, as corny as that sounds. Each one has a heart. I went through this period where all my work had hearts in it.
Yeah.
And here was like, okay, this could be really corny and really stupid, but I was like, you know what? I don't care. This is what I want to do right now. It's just where I was coming from.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit of love that goes to somebody. And maybe I'm not going to make a ton of money from doing it, but it warms my heart to do it.
Yeah.
So there's monetary reasons to do things, and then there's other reasons to do things as well.
That's right. There's the feeling sustained, the feeling supported, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to start to wrap this up. And the question that I ask most people, you probably, you've having heard several of the podcasts, already know what's coming probably. How would you like to be remembered?
And I did think about this. So I thought a lot about it, actually. I just want to be remembered as being really making art that was as honest as I can, because that's my thing. Coming to terms with who I am as an artist, coming to terms with the kind of imagery that I make. It's been a lifelong journey, and as much as I've always made work in that way, it's there. You come to a place of acceptance, and just my work is just about being as honest as possible as to how that's something we didn't get into maybe another time, is how the brain works and how
exactly.
Yeah,
and since you listen to the podcast, you know that this is not your last time or your first and last time. Yeah.
So how the brain works is neurologically is a very fascinating subject to me, and for me to come to terms with how my brain works, and that's why my work is the way it is, and it is as honest as I can be. So
so you might be interested in this book. It's by Eric R. Kandel. Oops, there it is. Eric R.
Kandel,
right? And it's called Reductionism in Art and Brain Science.
Oh,
that's a good read.
Yeah.
And bridging the two cultures. It's really, really interesting.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating.
I'm
totally fascinated about art from a neurological point of view.
Yeah. Again, real quickly, between my abstract work and my now more objective work, my abstract work, I tried to paint nothing with no emotions. My objective work, it was very hard not to become emotional. In fact, that was the biggest stumbling block. It did go beyond shapes, sizes, lines, forms, colors, and just struggling through it. And then very timidly putting it out there in front of a couple of people to just see, because it's either I'm gonna fall on my face or whatever. Or Herb Cummings used to be, I think it was Herb Cummings used to say, so you pull down your pants on the steps of City Hall, and either people are going to applaud or they're going to laugh. So and then to have people tell you exactly what is going on, and seeing other things that are like, oh my God, it is there. It's absolutely amazing. So there is something. There's much more to it. The viewers, I think it's called the viewer's share, is what Gombrich who wrote the Story of Art referred to. The viewer's share. They have to walk away with something.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, Nancy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I'm going to wrap this up. This is Ron Fortier again with our guest, Nancy Hayes, sculptor, ceramicist, now painter. And thank you for listening. And stay tuned for our next podcast on the In Focus podcast, brought to you by the South Coast Artist Index. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be the artist you believe you are, and let's take care of each other out there.